Cloud. Welcome to OCWG meeting number 28, where we're continuing to work on OCIF. So let's see. I did see, Max, that you pushed a couple of commits like right before this. Is there
Yeah,
anything
but
in particular?
that was just preparation. I copied this back over to a new folder, renamed the version identifier so that we can start doing something actually.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, start changing the 051 draft. Let's see. Yeah, so last time we met, we released 05. It seems like if I'm stretching back my brain to the meeting before local first comp, there was some discussion about nesting canvases, which did not make it into 05. Am I remembering that correctly, or did it actually land?
In primitive ways, you can always nest canvases by giving an item a resource, which is an OCIF file, but it's not explained in the spec at all how that works.
And if you nest an OCIF file, you have to wonder how does that nested OCIF file get represented? Presumably that resource would be like attached to some node to place it somewhere in the scene. But then what does that node correspond to in the other OCIF file? And this was briefly discussed at last week's meeting, or 3 weeks ago's meeting, the last one, which I wasn't able to attend, but I did watch the recording. And in response to that, I did open up a GitHub issue.
Got it.
Discussing this if we want to spend some time on that.
Yeah, I think the real question should be like one of priority. Like that does feel like an obvious way to improve the spec. But is it the most valuable thing we could be working on right now? I'm not sure. It feels like right now the most valuable thing is more implementation, more complete implementations supporting OCIF. And if I could throw all my chips on one number, it would definitely be a Obsidian canvas to OCIF round trip for a couple of reasons. One, I feel like the Obsidian canvas, the Obsidian community is like very well aligned around like files as being important and all of that kind of thing. And so I think from a values perspective, they kind of get it already. And so that's helpful. Also, there's a lot of Obsidian users, somewhere north of 1 million people using Obsidian. So I'm sure that Obsidian Canvas as a feature within Obsidian is a much smaller use case, but it's still, I think the Excalidraw plugin is the second most installed plugin in among all Obsidian plugins. So like clearly canvases are a really big use case inside of Obsidian. So that's one reason why I would say Obsidian Canvas to OCIF and round trip makes sense. The other reason is that Obsidian Canvas is just a really simple canvas. There's really not many features. And so having full support there is actually much more attainable than going after something like TLDraw, which actually is pretty robust, or something far more robust like a Visio or that kind of thing. But I think having that one, like starting to build around a single implementation that is already useful feels like a way that we could learn that things that are closer to core than like embedding canvases are actually not working well, and we should fix those. So.
The other sort of open issue is having a root item. We also haven't finalized that.
That's right. Yep. And I think there's a discussion out there for this one, right? Let's see.
Well, it's kind of touched on in the issue I opened. My suggestion was to reserve the node at index 0 for the root, but there's some questions of like, is that the best approach? Or is that like the OCIF style approach? Because OCIF doesn't really use indices for anything else. So should there be
No.
some special UID for a root, but then two different
No.
canvases? Yeah, like I don't know exactly how this is going to work with OCIF.
Yeah.
We should have a new property that says root item or whatever is this ID. And then it's not adding any magic strings. I think we had one meeting where we discussed magic strings, magic indices, or explicit link, and then we settled on the explicit link. Maybe that was the one where you were not there. I don't know.
Having some kind of just property that says, the node with this ID is the root makes a lot of sense to me.
And I
The
think,
most
yeah,
explicit, easiest for LLMs, you know.
true. And human readers as well. And
Yeah.
yeah, it is, yeah, and I think we explicitly, at some point, we had the conversation around magic strings as like a anti-pattern or a design decision of like, we're going to try to avoid magic strings wherever possible. So yeah, that'd be a good instance of that. Seems like a reasonable thing to respond to. Yeah, and then there's also sort of like the root transform piece. Yeah, I think Michael, my thinking, so Michael dropped in chat, for those who are watching the recording, the JSON validator website that he had vibe coded / worked on. And there's already one that does JSON canvas to OCIF, does that direction. What I'm thinking that we need to get in place in order to enable people to more effectively contribute and adopt is having like a well set up library. And I actually have a plan for this that I worked with an LLM to generate of like how would we have a library that pushes to npm, that is like well named, that has a CLI tool around it, that that is in a mono repo, that has, you know, all of the properties that we would want from like a well set up repository, so that if people want to contribute, we could be like, oh, you're working on an Obsidian or an OCIF to TL draw, like put it here, like in this directory, and then here's how you would like add an option to the CLI tool to be able to use that and get people into an iterative flow. Here's where the test suite would live, right? Like having all opinions about all of that, I think will make it a lot easier for people to contribute, as well as it'll make it a lot easier for LLMs to do this work, right? If we have a well-structured repository, asking an LLM to generate the code to do, you know, a round trip or two, or generate a test suite, we kind of know where things live.
I think that's a great goal, and I only suggest to approach it more agile. So we just build 2 tools, and then we align their structures, where we place the test suits and so on. And from that, we extract how the other tools should also behave in the same way. Because top down is harder to guess how to do things well. That's at least an error I often made. So going bottom up is just quicker.
Doing a practical approach where you're looking at the actual implementations and tools and learning lessons from those is a good idea.
So
Yeah,
you're
and if
thinking
you have
like a CLI tool for like OCIF to JSON Canvas, and then another CLI tool in a different repo for JSON Canvas to OCIF?
no, it can be in the same repo. Why not?
Yeah, for sure.
And I wouldn't even start with a CLI tool. Maybe start with a library. I mean, what is the core? Maybe we start with what Michael has already. So he has a working app which sort of contains a library, maybe not explicitly factored out, but there should be something that is a library. So how could a guy like Michael download that library from another repository? What needs to happen so that, how can we make this library this way so that you can just put it into an app? And
I
from
think if we,
that setup, we learn how these libraries need to be shaped, maybe.
make that monorepo with the plan that Jess has, then we can add separate packages, separate apps for with the implementations and the library as well. It can there are a lot of tools that can do that easily. We just have to choose the tool. I have some experience with NX, for example.
Oh, it looks like here it is, the monorepo plan docs.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Gemini going crazy on like how to generate the library.
It's fine to be inspired by that when setting up the initial attempt, but just not
I hear what you're saying.
not get lost in the 17th sub bullet when.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and I think a good near-term goal that brings it even nearer and is aligned towards the OCIF to JSON Canvas use case would be, like you mentioned, Max, extracting the library from Michael's app as a starting point, with the intention of basically, now that we've extracted it to this library over here, now we can just import it back in. And now we haven't broken anything. We've just proven that we can give someone a library that does something. Now we can go improve the library, which like doesn't change anything for the validator. Every time we release a new version of the library, we can just, refresh the library in the validator. That's a nice, like, always the agile principle of like always have working software. Of like,
I think that enables us to learn more about the real issues. And also, as soon as we have two libraries doing something with OCIF, some urge will emerge. What is the shared stuff? What is common to all these OCIF libraries? What are the common OCIF core tools? And I have no idea yet what these are.
yeah, darn
Yeah.
right, it's golden rule. Yeah, it turns out that the software engineering principles for using agentic coding techniques are the exact same software engineering principles that you should use when working with humans. They turn out to just go faster because the LLM can go faster than humans. Crazy.
The LLM is like a junior software engineer with a lot of caffeine.
And an autistic one too.
Yeah.
It's not so good with humans, but it's very good with text patterns.
Not so good. And also very forgetful, like wakes up every day and has forgotten everything from the day before. You have to like point it out everything back out to it again. It's like a well, I'm gonna make Max, you have been christened the host of this meeting. As I mentioned in Discord, I actually have to run to another meeting, but you guys can continue using this one. And the recording will continue as well. And I'll try to catch up on the last half hour. Had another meeting come up that I have to attend that I can't reschedule. So I'll see you guys shortly.
Then good luck with your Friday demo.
Yeah.
Thank
good
you.
luck.
Maybe I'll send you guys a video. Oh, yeah. See you.
See you. Bye.
All right, so we have this library thing. What is a real step we can make so that we have a working library in the monorepo that can be imported from the validator? I'm not a TS developer, so I really don't know what needs to be done.
Finding the time. I can do it without problem, but
is it
it's
totally
the
clear for
time
you
that-
how what the expectations
Yeah.
for the library are? Oh.
Yeah, quite well. I can set it up as well, but we can work from there. But it's more a time issue to find the time and start, because I've already tried finding the time but couldn't yet.
Yeah,
I've
you
tried with
already
more-
spent a lot of time, so that's
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next productive thing we can do in this meeting is maybe to define more about this root item thing.
Yeah, we'll do that, I think. I will try and start with the monorepo and the library before the
Excellent.
next meeting. So
As for the root item stuff, I'm happy to discuss it, but I should note that I have most of my thoughts pretty much written down in the issue. So, do you think maybe Max, Michael, and y'all can just take it from there if you want. Whatever we want to do that's OCIF like,
Yeah, so how do we call the property? For the root item, it should be root node maybe? Or canvas node?
I guess a root node would make sense.
Michael?
yeah, I think it sounds the root node is really obvious, I think.
Okay,
It's the
so
root,
root node it
so,
is.
yeah.
So I can obviously edit the spec.
And also, one thing we should decide about is if we have this kind of expectation that OCIF nodes are just by default at the top level, and you do like parent-child relationships to make them like be children. So we should
I
probably
remember the
explicitly
discussion.
we will need to explicitly define that if there's no relation, if the node isn't explicitly a child of something, then it should be a child of the root node.
Yeah, that's a very sane idea. Do we allow to redundantly also state that it explicitly that it is a child of the root node, although that's implicitly already there? We have some of these hacks already.
Well, if I was, building an importer and I came across that data, I don't see any reason I wouldn't be able to parse that. So I guess it could be allowed, but it would be redundant. So yeah.
Yeah, just show in examples to make it explicit and then say in the comment is actually inferred anyway. Or
Yeah.
so the spec would say every node that has no parent does have a parent, namely the root node.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And is a root node required in a canvas, or can we also get around that?
That's
Maybe
a
a
good
root node is
question. So, some apps need to have a root node. So you could say like, oh, if there isn't one defined, one would be implicitly generated. And then some apps don't have that, right? So, I'm not exactly sure how it'll work there if there is one. But regardless, I think that we have something will typically represent the OCIF document, and whether that there's a node associated with that. In some apps there needs to be, and we can be generated implicitly. But then if this property is defined where there is a root node, then that root node represents the document.
so if I'm parsing an OCIF file and I need a root node and there's none defined, I just create one because obviously there's no information yet about formatting or anything, so I just make one up.
Yes. This is this for precedent. This is like what Godot does when parsing GLTF files. If there's no
and
explicitly defined root node, we just make one.
and do we have like built-in settings like the default font size, which propagates down from the root node to all other nodes by default is 12? Is that built into the spec?
That's a good question. I don't know.
That's a little bit like what the HTML default style sheet does. It defines some defaults for margins and font sizes.
And that was a design principle of OCIF, correct? So that once a node has some kind of theme attached to it, that theme like propagates down to its descendants.
Yeah,
So therefore,
yeah.
if you want to have a document-wide theme, the most straightforward way to do that is just to put the theme on the root node.
Yeah, that was the idea. We haven't defined themes yet, but yeah, that's how it should work, I guess. And then if there is no theme defined because the file is so small, experimental or whatever, then there needs to be some defaults. Like if you have no root node, then God gives you font size 12.
Yeah,
Okay.
that does need to be defined, yes.
Okay, so we need to, I mean, the other settings are easier, like the default scale factor is 1, the default rotation is 0, the default colors maybe black on white or maybe not.
Yeah, dark mode versus light mode.
Yeah. What's the default of the default? Okay. I guess this is enough to draft the first thing about root nodes. There was a question from G, I think, no, somebody else on the chat said, The node transform was weird. We have moved scale into the node transform extension, but rotation wasn't moved. And yeah, honestly, I don't know. Why haven't we moved rotation over into the node transforms? Should we? The node transform was for relative nodes, relative positioning. And rotation is, in that regard, an orthogonal concept. And right now, rotation remained a core property of visual nodes. And that distinction maybe feels a bit weird. But okay, it's not a huge problem. We can just document it better. But is there like a clear justification why one is standard and one is extension?
I think the reasoning, if I recall correctly from the previous meetings, was something along the lines of that you can use size instead of scale if you just want the global size of that object.
True.
But scale is in kind of inherently a thing that affects that node and all descendants, so it affects, the descendant position nodes relative positions. But rotation does make sense as its own like global rotation property, right? So it matches well with the nodes having a position.
Yeah, I mean, position and it's a good explanation, but position and rotation also affect all descendants. I mean, okay, position needs to be a core property. So I think this is just how things are. It needs to be documented better, but there's no very hard criteria why it's exactly this way, because it can. And
Yeah,
scale clearly belongs to this parent-child problem. Scale is useless without parent-child. That's maybe the thing. And rotation, like size, as you said, and position can be used without parent-child. Okay, that's what I can write. Okay, so we more or less solved that. Isn't it now super easy to define nested canvases? Because
I
we
would think so. If as long as we have the transforms figured out, and we're gonna do a root node property, and at that point, it seems pretty straightforward to have nested canvases. Just do it. We're done, right?
there's one thing. We have a node that says my resource is an OCF file, and that OCF file says I contain a root node, maybe. Then what's the relation of this importing node to the nested node?
They are the same node.
Ah,
So essentially, what happens is like,
yeah, that's clever.
yeah. So the node from the document gets, generated and then placed in that node's place. So an effect, and if there's any properties on the instance of the node, like a position, that will like override the what was in the file. So that way you could have, the same OCF file, have it instanced 3 times in 3 different places, and each one has their own position.
So the master, no, parent, the parent node overrides the imported node's properties.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Yeah, I think that's the magic thing. It's the same node and the overrides. We have another instance where overriding happens already if we have parent-child with inherit properties or something like this, inherit. That's where we can steal this inheritance mechanism from, because we also have extensions, and then it's not so easy to define how extensions override each other. But I think we should have defined that already somewhere, and I can steal from that. Excellent. Yeah. Okay. I can use that for a draft.
So if I understand correctly, nested canvas, that will be the nested canvas itself will be a resource, not defined inside the main nodes.
As long as it's in the same nodes, then it's just the same canvas. I mean, there's no benefit. I mean, what's the difference between a nested canvas and a nested node in this view?
Yeah, I was thinking that if we have this root node has probably also has a special type, OCF canvas / canvas, something like that, and that you could have a node of that same type, which is the starting point of another of the nested canvas itself.
I'm not sure whether we need a canvas type special node or not. I have no intuition on that yet. Maybe. And then you say, what if we have multiple of these special canvas nodes?
Yeah.
Well, I can only answer that when I understood what a canvas node is, how it is different from a normal node. Maybe it is the same. That would be beautiful if we don't need a canvas node. And if every node can define themes which propagate down, then any node can play the role of a root node.
Yeah, so what this can I would say they are the same, and that also means that, you know, if if you have some scene at runtime, you can just take any node and save that to an OCF file and save that subtree as its own OCF file. So you can any subtree of nodes can become an OCF file if needed.
Yeah, and what happens to an OCF file where we have a tree of parent-child, and the root node is not the ultimate parent, but some other node? So what if the root node of the canvas has parents? What does that mean?
It doesn't um here, let me get a little diagram out. We could do like a screen share or something.
I mean, we can say this is, I have to allow it now. Okay. Now you should have the right to share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I hate how the Zoom interface changes. All right. So let's say we'll have a node, and then there's another node as a child of it, and another node as a child of it, and another node as a child of it, and some like long nested thing. If you, for example, wanted to save this node as let me change colors. If you wanted to save this node as its own OCF file, um, that this whole tree gets saved as the OCF file.
Yeah,
Um,
that's perfect. That makes a lot of
and and
just
there's more. You said it's not the ultimate root, so like there's still like these that don't get saved, and what ends up if you want to use this OCF file, then what uses it is effectively a tree of nodes that looks like this, where this node is kind of present in like in both, uh, where it says like, hey, I'm the root, and uh, it has any like inherent properties, but then like transform properties will be specified inside of this scene, which is instancing it. So the transform of the root node in the OCF file is 0, or it's the identity transform, because the root of a canvas isn't transformed relative to the canvas, because that doesn't really make sense, you know.
What about stuff like theme? Let's say the parent here defined theme is all fonts are yellow. So when I export it, my node is yellow too. And after export, suddenly it lost that yellow. So we could, if we do
Oh,
the
I
partial
see.
export, We could
So like
then
if
do the
if
materialized properties.
okay, good question. So like what if this node here says that it's yellow,
Mhm.
yellow something, and that's going to apply recursively to all
Downwards,
these other
yeah.
ones. So I guess that what that means is that those theme properties have to be copied to this node when they get saved.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Actually, my question was a different one, but this is also a very good insight. My question was, if we have just one file without partial exports or anything, just one file, let's say this one with 5 nodes. But the file says, actually, my root node is the one in the middle. Then we are like,
Uh,
yeah, okay, fine, you can do that. But what does it mean? Why
I
is
don't think
it?
that's valid. I think if we have a series of parent-child relations, then if the root node cannot be a node that is a child of any other node, you know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
That's at least the same way to say, yeah.
if you wanted to say that this one is the root, uh, if that is the root, then this here makes that impossible. You can't you can't if the existence of this relation combined with the existence of this as the root makes the file invalid. Those two things cannot coexist.
Can you have
Okay.
multiple root nodes in one file?
No, because that defeats the purpose of a root node. If you wanted multiple kind of like nodes that exist at the top level, so let's say like you wanted some node next to this one, then you would what you would do is you would actually just make like another node which is the root, and then that node has that, and then may also have, you know, some other nodes, and these collectively um would be uh, quotes the root nodes of the file, but
Sort of,
there's only
yeah.
one file. The file itself is represented by this node.
I like that, and I think that makes it easier to define the next thing. We wanted to be able to define the view. So here's an OCF file, you just opened it, but please, when you open it, zoom to this rectangle. That's what some formats support. And this information, where to zoom, yeah, would be something for an OCF type canvas extension,
Yeah, I
because it can
think
only
in
exist once per canvas,
yeah
right?
in TLDraw this is a separate part of their file format or special node if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, at TearDraw, they also have these pages where you sort of have multiple canvas in one
Yeah,
file, like you have multiple slides in PowerPoint. Um, we could say there's still only one root node, and these pages from TLDraw are just nodes in our canvas, but you can give them a special type. This is actually a TLDraw page. So if you are TLDraw, go ahead and import them back as pages. But if you are not TLDraw, just render them as nodes. So you have 6 boxes and can zoom them. I mean, pages don't have to be tabs on the side. So for pages, we could have a TLDraw extension and not make it an OCF feature. And for defining the view, we could have an extension that's only applicable for the root node. So that
yeah,
would be, yeah.
I think TLDraw has a settings node type where they store that the camera information
Settings.
in.
Yeah, how should we call this root node type? I think I don't like settings, I like canvas better because it's
Camera.
information about the whole canvas or document attributes or metadata or an
So,
open.
one thought I have about the idea of defining like an area to zoom to. Um, one option is that we could just make the like that like area of focus be just the size of the root node, But that would mean that the area you're zooming to is always going to have its top left corner be the root node, um, or be the origin of the canvas, and then the zoom is just a matter of like where does the other corner go? Like how far like that are you zooming?
I think it's quite clever, but maybe not. Maybe it doesn't go far enough to define any rectangle to zoom to. Or should we call this root node extension just OCIF type root node? Because that's the extension you can only use on the root node, whatever you put in there.
Makes sense. I'm good with any of these options, really.
Okay, yeah.
From my existing experience with like, 3D formats, there is no such thing as like a part of a 3D model we zoom into when we load it. So
Uh-huh.
this is outside of my area of expertise. So whatever you think is best for Canvas apps, really.
Michael, do you have requirements, suggestions, ideas on that?
In my own Canvas tool, I don't have that. When I load the file, it tries to show it completely, and you have to zoom in yourself.
Okay, so
to
another
store
example
it.
would be metadata like author, last modification date,
Yeah,
the tool that created the export. Where would we store all this stuff?
yeah. I think in something called it's something with meta information, or I'm now looking at a TLDraw format, but I can't find what I'm looking for.
Inside of GLTF, it looks like this. There's a top level asset object in the JSON that stores information about what generated it, what's the version of the specification, and so I would assume that like information about like what tool generated a file is going to be some special top level section that has like metadata about the file.
Is asset a concept that's recurring in GLTF? So is that like the root asset? Or
This only occurs once per file and exactly once.
uh-huh.
Is not allowed to not have it. And it only exists at the root.
So maybe we should build ours not as a node extension, but really into the top level of the canvas file itself. Makes it maybe
Right.
clearer.
Yeah,
Because if you have a node extension, like, are you saying that if maybe the node extension says metadata about the file, like what app generated it? Well, but the app didn't generate just that one node, it generated everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I just feel that somehow this extension mechanism we have needs to reoccur for the metadata part of the canvas too, so that it keeps being extensible for more document level stuff that apps need to store. But yeah, maybe we just have node extension, relation extensions, and canvas extensions.
All right, well, I'm gonna stop sharing because I think I've shown what I needed to do to show here.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I think so. At least in my brain, it's nicely organized now what the next steps for the spec need to be. Thanks a lot for these clarifications.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, I will attempt to also define the nesting. I mean, with the ideas we have now, that's easy, it seems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds
I,
good.
and I haven't updated my Godot implementation of OCF in a few months, but I'll probably get back into it, especially if we are defining the nesting, because then I've actually already done the nesting for another format, so it should be very easy for me to do this for OCF as well, and provide like
Cool,
an example thing that can generate nested OCFs.
cool.
Yeah, I think I also already implemented nesting in OCF. But that will be obsolete probably because I've Obsidian Canvas. There was this tool dropped in our Discord,
Ah, yeah,
which is
this
based on
charcoal,
yeah, exactly.
charcoal something.
And
And
they
they had
have
some kind of nesting, right?
yeah, they have the nested implemented, and I
And
implemented that as well, but in
do
the
you
custom
remember
implementation.
if our concept now is different, or does it fit together,
Yeah,
or
yeah, it's different. There it's a child in it's a property in a node which contains then the complete canvas.
that was the
It's
mix
diff
of grouping and um,
yeah,
parent-child somehow into one ad hoc. Yeah. Okay,
yeah,
then I like our concept better.
yeah,
Okay. Yeah, nice. I think that was a good meeting.
yeah, for sure. And I
Now
will
time to
plan the
get
next
some.
one.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the plannings.
No worries. It's a small task, but although sometimes I forget some of the last details.
But it's a very important task to keep us together.
Yeah, happy to do it. No problem.
Okay, so I'll hit stop record.